Perfect.
Just a quick question about if it's represented in a different.
Testing. Okay. If it's represented in a different plan, can we assume that it will be accomplished in that plan?
Well, the goal of the overall comprehensive plan is to roll in past planning documents. For transformative projects, we do want to explicitly state that we are making considerations for those individual planning processes. So in this case, even though Riverfront Connector is in the downtown strategic plan, it's in the Parks and Rec plan, it's in the complete streets policy, we do want to have considerations from the comprehensive plan in 2023, providing official backing to that plan. Yep.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering if this might qualify as one of the types of projects that are large enough to come out of sort of a different plan or different documents and be something that the committee could address, even though it's already discussed elsewhere.
Yeah, we do see this as a transformative project. We know that the Downtown and Riverfront Subcommittee is going to be interested in this plan. We also know that the Transportation Subcommittee is going to be interested in this. And that's a commingling of outcomes. And we expect a lot of that through the comprehensive plan. But no other plan is going to be devoting essentially 2 to 3 pages of actual detail to this type of project. So that's kind of where we see you all fleshing out this project a bit more in depth.
If we're talking about whether or not we think it should be included, at least initially, my personal feeling is that it should be, especially considering some of the ideas that were first proposed related to that in this committee, including connecting to the museum and to businesses. I think there's enough already kind of proposed from this group that it makes sense to have that within here.
It's also important too for just a continuity perspective. Anytime you're talking about a trail, it takes multiple years to finish a trail, especially something like a riverfront connector trail where you have so many properties and so many phases involved. You know, you think about any of the main trails in large cities, it takes a long time. So having that continuity, bringing it in from the past plan to the current plan, demonstrating that the community is still interested greatly in a project like this, I think would be just fine and would be a good thing.
So as far as the 4 things that they're lenses that we have to look at it, is it in the conceptual phase or are there things that already exist with its design?
I would describe this project as largely still conceptual. There are some elements that we intend to integrate, like portions that would be riding through Levy Park, for example. However, we are still securing those easements and other agreements in order to make it into a reality. So we aren't at a point where we are, for example, even beginning to prepare design documents necessarily. I believe a previous plan had it cantilevering out over the Mississippi River. We doubt that would be able to be approved by the Army Corps of Engineers. But so right now would be a good time to begin engagement and considerations. Yes.
Yeah, really glad you asked that because it looks like it fits the other 3 perfectly, and that and based on how many votes it's gotten, to me, it seems like definitely something we could tackle and should.
Does anybody else want to add any other opinions related to the Riverfront Connector Trail system idea? All right, it seems like there's a consensus to proceed. I'm seeing some head nods. I'm seeing some good comments coming out. Everybody seems pretty satisfied. So we will go ahead and begin maybe with that project at our next meeting to begin to flesh that out. We do have some background information that we'll be able to provide to you in advance of that meeting because that is an ongoing project. As Carlos pointed out, that continuity exists and we want to make sure that you all enter with good information. The next most popular idea was affordable/accessible housing. And I think that really came through very clearly in the phase 1 engagement that Engage Winona did for the city of Winona. I think it's also come through clearly over the past few years. There's been a demonstrated need for housing. We know this from our 2016 housing study, and we know this from the ongoing demand for additional housing. We've had about 300 apartment units erected over the last few years. So we know that there is actually a demand for consistent more housing. And we also know there was a 0% vacancy rate for subsidized housing in our community. So we need additional housing. How can we make this type of project relate to those 4 criteria for the transformative project subcommittee? Anybody have any thoughts related to that?
I don't have necessarily a thought related to the 4, but what I do want to understand a little bit better is you have an entire housing subcommittee. And if the housing subcommittee is working on probably the same conversation, is that where that should happen? And should this committee focus on these, other things, not negating the importance of housing, but it doesn't feel to me like that is necessarily this committee's task, because we have all these other things to consider, and there's a whole committee looking at housing. I mean, and doing, I'm sure, a fabulous job in having this exact conversation. It feels like an overlap or duplicate of conversation. So I'm just curious if maybe that's just my thinking.
Yeah, I guess I'd join in saying, we can't by any means minimize the importance of the issue. But my problem with pursuing it in this committee is just trying to figure out how that fits as a project that, it's already bifurcated. They're affordable, accessible, that we're not really dealing with something that could be lumped out as a single project. And I think maybe we should leave it to the housing committee and others, economic development, whatever.
Scott?
Yeah, again, kind of as I said last meeting, housing was listed as the #1 concern by community members from the engagement on the data. It seems like even if it is, some of their work is replicated, I think we, could think of things that would be transformative. I think it does fit into the top 4 things, in the sense that we have a Winona Housing and Redevelopment Authority that we could continue. That is an existing thing that we could continue to build on. We do have physical structures in the community that could be added to. We could build new housing in the community. We could follow one of the plans that's being done in Minneapolis, which is called the NOAA Fund, which is naturally occurring affordable housing, or existing housing is bought by the city in order to reduce the overall inflationary forces and market forces, and provide that to the community. So available housing in the community or apartments in the community could be bought by the city, minimally renovated, and then supplied to the community as a part of our public housing and affordable housing initiative. And so I think there are things that we could suggest that, if replicated by the housing committee, would then further validate the kinds of things that they were doing. And so I think, if this is the #1 issue of concern in our community, and we say, here's what we think we could do to add to that, it would be transformative on a kind of definitional level.
Carlos and Luca, clarification on the plan as a whole. Is it the charge of any of the other portions of the plan to actually define projects? Or are they more kind of policy and goal type pieces of the plan?
You're absolutely correct, Jim. The goal is more to have goals, objectives, and strategies from those other 11 subcommittees, and these are really more project-based. So
therefore, the housing under this committee would be the ones that actually talk about how to build the housing, not the policy and guidance to develop housing.
That's a really great way of putting that, and I think Carlos wants to add to that a little bit too.
Yes, I think that the natural progression from some of the other committees is that, exactly as Luke mentioned, they would work on goals, objectives, and strategies, but of course, projects are going to come up. And this is where I can see the housing committee saying that, hey, you know what, we have these some great ideas here, and there is a specific project that we'd like the Transformative Project Committee to take a look at. So that's kind of how I see things going. There's no reason why we couldn't, at the next Housing Subcommittee meeting, relay to them that, hey, this came up as the #1 most important thing in this committee that we wanted to comment on. So just so you guys are aware of that, we can definitely do that. And related to the 4 criteria, what we were looking at this doing is helping us to figure out which projects to talk about first and to address first. There's no reason why we couldn't talk about housing maybe a little bit later on. And I think that that might be good too, because at that point, the Housing Subcommittee will have had time to kind of come out with some of their more goals and objectives so we can see some of the things that they're thinking about. And if you have an idea above and beyond that, that's where we can add to what they have done so far.
Chris Stout, I saw that you had raised your hand if you'd like to go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, all I wanted to add was that I just think one of the cool things about this committee is how many different entities it represents, from all the colleges to the school board to the community, and having that network that can maybe bring different resources to bear could make a project happen quicker and be of use to more of our community. So I think talking about housing here is great because it includes so much of our community that could maybe use it. I think a project that comes from here, like you said, maybe gets the attention of the other committee and we can work together on it. But I think if we don't talk about it here, we lose some of that networking that we can do here with all of our different organizations.
I like the idea of having the housing continue to be brought up. I think any of the transformative projects land in a subcommittee too, as far as like, I couldn't think of a single transformative project that probably wasn't going to show up somewhere else. And so I think it makes sense that if we want to make transformative impact in housing, that it hangs out here. I had another thought, but I lost it. So I'll turn it off now. If it comes to I'm struggling to wrap my mind around what a transformative housing thing is, like as a project. And I'm just hoping we get super creative.
So what I've been thinking too, and sort of on that note, I do really like the idea of what we've sort of been discussing about having that be an ongoing thing that might come up later, perhaps give this committee some chance to kind of sink our teeth into some more kind of clear, concrete projects, and then tackle something a little bit more complex and involved, such as housing.
Well, and there's also things that may come up in other committees, not just housing, but also land use, for instance, talking about reutilizing existing pieces of property for a different use. One of them might be housing. So there may be significant projects that come up in that subcommittee as well. So how about we keep it on the list here, but then discuss some of the other projects first and definitely loop back to it and keep it in our minds.
So one of the more concrete projects that I do want to maybe transition to because of the housing conversation is the community center / public safety building, which would incorporate fire, police, and a community center. And the ongoing conversations that are currently occurring with city council. This is very much still conceptual phase. We did anticipate, city staff anticipated that this would be ranked higher in the initial conversations that we had in our last meeting. So when we initially did the voting for that, we didn't really see it come out in the final numbers. So this might be a credit to Scott's idea of putting all of the ideas out at once. Why I'm saying this is a great segue from the housing conversation is as we consider use of land for city use, using city land for public safety buildings and for community center buildings, we should also think about what do we do with city land that is then going to be vacated or could be used for a different use. And I think that this might be a really good example for where we could say, hey, the city owns a lot of land, things like owning parks or owning even streets or owning even a golf course. But also, what do you do with a vacated block or a half block when you move a fire station, for example? So how do we feel about this project and discussing this and its tie-ins to the overall committee? And Scott, it looks like you're reaching forward.
I mean, there's seeing I have a lot of problems with it, just in a variety of ways. Primarily like shifting rhetorically from police, fire, community center to community center, public safety building, a kind of move that I don't know if it was Chad's decision to do, but as of the last city council meeting, it kind of there's this quality to which 3 separate projects are being rhetorically and logistically wedged together when that shouldn't be the automatic presumption. And so we're being kind of asked to consider them as a singular project when in reality, both the city planning process and the decision-making of the community, which has yet to be heard from because there's no public comment at city council, is assumed that these 3 things would happen together, when in reality, they could just as easily be done as 3 separate projects or have 3 separate merits. And so to say we as a committee should consider them to be the singular project is just not accurate. And even, Councilwoman Moeller said, she would not be comfortable having a police and fire department together, but she'd be fine with the fire department and new community center, and police would be set. And so like even the city council is not in agreement that that's a singular kind of 3-part project. I think just in general, there are, as we heard on Monday from the city council testimony, there's certainly aspects of the community center and potentially a senior center that could be transformative to the community, and obviously the need for a fire department is a basic, thing that is needed towards community safety. But that need for a fire department is not transformative. It's just maintenance. And based off the last kind of 2 years of, arguably 10 years, arguably 200 years of learning about like safety in communities and racial justice, police are not a transformative institution. They're a degenerative, criminalizing institution. And so if we actually enshrine within this committee to say that police are a transformative institution, I would strongly object to that. So.
Jerome, can you make sure your mic's on?
Right. I'd say that I would offer that a project that is on the table and under public discussion that involves 2 of the primary functions of city government, police protection and fire protection, along with community recreation, senior center, and several blocks of prime real estate definitely would constitute a transformative project or set of projects. The decision that is made regarding these projects is going to affect the city for years to come, generations to come, possibly. It's going to change the face and change the use of significant portions of our land, and how we spend a considerable chunk of money. And I think that it's something that really is imperative that it be given the widest and the most consistent consideration by the public, and investigation.
Would this be something that's possible to get more background information on? Sounds like there's already been quite a bit of discussion and debate, which frankly, I do not know much of. So I'd love to know more if I can.
I think that's something that we could provide in the future. I think with this one too, especially since it's in public discussion right now, if it's something that this committee wants to focus on, something that would be key is timing in terms of, what we would talk about potentially, and, what decisions would be made at a certain point in time. So if it's something that we decide to move forward with, what we'd want to do in terms of staff perspective is figure out what will be the best timing for this, for the committee to be able to talk about it in a way that benefits not just the committee, but also the overall discussion. So that's just another consideration I'll throw out there.
Chris Stout, you also had a note that you wanted to talk about maintenance maybe, or perceiving public or fire and police as maintenance of projects rather than transformative projects. Would you like to add to that?
I just wanted to put in the chat that I sort of agreed with that sentiment that police and fire are sort of basic responsibilities of the city, that's infrastructure, that's maintenance. And those are the things that a city should be doing. And so it's like, when I think of transformative projects, I was sort of thinking sort of like, sort of the edges of what a city government does, things that are going to radically change, the way we use land. And I know it's all interconnected, but it seemed like fire and police, that was more of an infrastructure rather than transformative.
I would agree with that, but I also wouldn't want to dismiss the fact that our police and fire and any other of our safety kinds of specialists are an integral part of the community, and that they come along beside us, that they're not separate or different or have, a purpose. Any comment about, I don't agree with some of the things that are being, communicated, that, police and fire aren't, are doing things that are dismissive of our community. And I really believe that they're an integral part, and that they need to be included in our discussion of the health of our community, and that they're a big player in creating that. And I talk from the school perspective, that we need their support and we need them to be healthy partners with us. So I do think we need some additional background and more information. So I like, Carlos, what you're saying before we make a judgment about it. I think we need to have a better understanding of what is being asked, and that we can see how we fit into that process.
Jim, it looks like you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I agree that these are integral parts of our community, but the transformative aspect of community centers, police and fire and public safety is operational and programmatic, not a physical structure or place. So unless the transformative operations and organization of these folks are these groups are part of the transformative thinking, a new building or a new place or a new location in the city won't be transformative. So it's just how could this group partner with a bigger discussion about transforming how they interface with the community would be needed to make this transformative.
The last thing to just reiterate based off comments since I first spoke is that we're again kind of consistently connecting these three separate things together. And so it's not an automatic or even policy decision yet at any point that a community center would simultaneously be built with a police center, simultaneously built with the fire station. Our community might need improvements on all three of those. That's debatable. Remodeling could be done as well. And then the idea is, as mentioned, that police and fire are somehow inextricably linked as community goods is also debatable. We say police and fire often in the same kind of sentence, but I don't think we should consider those two as the same thing. And so part of the point that I'm trying to make is that if we had, again, a different kind of poll that just said community center, senior center, fire department building, police station, the vote might have come out differently and it probably wouldn't have made it out into our top 5. But because the city has rhetorically kind of constructed them as 3 inextricably linked projects, it seems like an inevitability that those would be considered together, which is not the case yet. That was not the decision made on last Monday. And so I don't think we should consider them to be this package deal either. It's just not the reality of what it could be or should be.
I think that the fact that we're looking at proposals that would bring them together on a significant portion of publicly owned land makes it significant. Also, in addressing the transformative aspects of functionality of this, bringing all emergency services under one roof and would enhance coordination. Currently, in an emergency situation, it generally generates a response from police, fire, and paramedics that all will be on the scene at the same time. Having them in what would become an emergency response center rather than separate entities could provide with a transformative rethinking of their roles and how they function in the community, and possible economies of cross training and activity, transforming their effectiveness. I think that when we're talking about these things, we have to be looking at those aspects as well as traditional and past perceptions of what these agencies do. And again, we're looking at a significant number of properties and how they will be utilized in the future and going forward. And once property is no longer available or put to another use, it's off the market. And so I think that this very much warrants consideration.
And thank you, everybody, for your input on this one. It's definitely something that's been in discussion publicly here over the last few months. So it sounds like there's kind of varying different viewpoints related to this project, or this representation that we have of this project and working with it on this committee. So what I would propose is bring it back to staff and letting staff work on timing as well as this committee's potential role, and bringing that forward to another meeting, as well as a method for this committee making a decision on whether, given those two things, timing and role, if you want to consider it. So if you don't mind, I'd suggest we move on to the next one. Thank you.
All right, and thank you all very much for that robust discussion. That's exactly what we're looking for here today as we kind of round these out. I do want to turn our attention to the Winona State University potential field house. This is a project that would potentially occupy a block or a portion of a block to the south of Winona State's existing campus. It would incorporate recreational facilities as well as additional programmatic opportunities for student athletes as well as the community to be involved. Jim, is there anything that I might be missing from that project in that overview that you would like to add?
It's the conceptual program for the project right now would be an indoor track facility that would give the Winona State facilities for our track team, which they currently do not have any winter training facilities. And then there would be a sports field inside the track and then the various support spaces. So as envisioned at this time, it's focused on serving Winona State. But I think the opportunity that would exist within this committee is finding partnerships that could expand the program so that it could also serve the community in ways that are not specifically focused on the university. So it was a chance to do a both and kind of discussion of, here's going to be a large indoor space that is going to be a significant structure within our community, and can we make it a partnership, joint organization operation versus a single entity occupying and managing the space.
And here I should probably note that this will probably have a spillover effect or at least some impact on the surrounding neighborhood as well. So to the south, we do have more residential character, to the west, a commercial corridor, and then to the north, the university itself along all these.
And the site that could be considered for it would be between south of the railroad tracks all the way to Sarnia, and then from Huff to Maine. All of that property could be in play. Now it means Winona State would have to move stadiums and baseball fields and other things, but it could really, I think that whole zone of the city could be looked at as a possible transformation.
So my comment is not an objection in any way, just clarification of our discussion from last time. So my memory of our discussion from last time about this topic was a kind of 2 or 3 part discussion. And so the WSU Fieldhouse was sort of connected to some idea of a convention center and an idea that I think Lydia brought up about like a winter use space. And so my question is, again, not an objection or an endorsement, just a clarification of like, when people voted on this, what did they have solely a WSU Fieldhouse in mind, or were they also still thinking about a convention center, winter use space? What are we saying when we just say this, or are we kind of just going with the sort of plan that Jim described? And so again, just a clarification.
When I cast my vote for this one, I didn't include this as one of my top 5 projects, but I did in the initial vote because I was under the assumption that it was part of an overarching idea of a space that could be used in the winter. So in my mind, just my gut reaction, and because I'm not a super sporty person, it doesn't appeal to me, but it doesn't have that inspired transformational feel to me. Only that I do believe there are other sports facilities in the community, maybe not just like this one. Does St. Mary's have tracks, indoor track? I don't know. Do these other facilities have some of these elements, and are they being used in a transformative way? And so let's see, what am I trying to say? It doesn't strike me as transformative. It strikes me as a really cool project and something that a lot of people could benefit from, but it doesn't have the reach that I would be looking for in a transformative project.
Chris, I see that you have your hand raised as well before we jump over to Ethan.
Yeah, as a resident of Rochester for a long time, the city of Rochester has been very effective in creating these I would call them transformative spaces using sports between their National Volleyball Center and between their field house and dome on the RCTC campus. And these are sort of buildings that are given day access priority to the high school, Century High School and RCTC. But then at night, they really do become community spaces that are rented out. And so my kid would be having baseball on one end and there'd be ping pong players and the next court, and then there'd be a curtain down and there'd be karate going on. And you had the community in and out of these buildings all nights and all weekends as they were rented out for these activities. And they really were a boost to the economy of the town. You're having tournaments coming in on the weekends, and that's drawing for restaurants and hotels. And so I think a good model to look at would be what Rochester has done with their National Volleyball Center and their RCTC facilities, because the times I've been there, I've just been amazed at how the community is in these buildings.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad to hear that before I commented, because my initial reaction is also sort of similar between this and also the community center. I was sort of voting on both of those as a large indoor space, for kind of the public use. But hearing that, and the WSU Fieldhouse on its own is also something that sounds like a great thing to happen. But hearing about the Rochester example is a nice example of how this could kind of fit into our committee.
Well, I worked at Century High School for a number of years, and that volleyball center is not only a place of community attraction, but it's also a place where public school students can use that facility on a daily basis for fight classes and other things. I had hoped, I agree with you, I thought the community center or the convention center was somewhere in the mix, because even, you know, coming to the community is one thing, but having, you know, an event center, someplace that you can go for, you know, big meeting space, we don't have that in this community. And I thought that would be a nice kind of thing, but I also like the, you know, interpretive center and the connections that Winona, being a little bit different than Rochester, has got more of that art flair to it. And it has, you know, so much, you know, interest, I think, in the community to do something like that, but we still don't have a place where people can gather. And, you know, this, we don't have enough sport facility use. I know that's always been a thing here, but the transformative piece of it for me with a convention center made me believe that we could do something that would attract people to come here for a purpose and then use the facilities around the area. So that kind of a convoluted answer to that Winona State thing, but I like the idea of Winona State, but I like a convention center even better.
Jim?
I would propose a WSU field house focused on WSU would not be transformative, and I'm probably not speaking on behalf of the university in saying that. What would truly be transformative would be a community event center. And maybe this should be titled a community event center and not specifically just a WSU field house, because it needs to serve more than just the Winona State University if it's going to be transformative and meet the 4 criteria that we've had.
Well, and perhaps that's part of it too. You know, if this committee decides to take a look at it, you know, I think one reason why it's up there is because it has been part of past planning documents. So we know that it's something that we've seen in the past that the institution is interested in. And perhaps if this is something that is discussed in this committee and that the outcome is that there is a desire to have more cross-programming, more public use, that type of thing, and that coordination is something that is plainly understood throughout the community, you know, that would be a good message to have in our comprehensive plan, so that when we're considering this project potentially in the future, that the university and other partners who are involved in the project address some of those things that people think are important. In addition to, you know, potential impacts that the project might have if you're drawing in a certain number of people, you know, that's gonna bring additional, you know, traffic. It's gonna bring additional, you know, foot traffic, car traffic, that type of thing. You know, any transformative or big project is gonna do that. But what are ways that, you know, that can be addressed within the project? Jim, I was wondering real quick, to kind of put you on the spot just a little bit, I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more, give us a little bit more background on the different types of things that are kind of in concept for this use. And I know it was an indoor space, and there are a couple of different uses. Could you shed some light on that?
In the current planning that we have?
For the field house.
Yeah, so the field house, as it's conceptually thought of right now, would occupy from the edge of the Quick Trip and Gordy's site. That's property we own. It would go across Winona Street and encompass the entire baseball field. So as part of this, for this to happen, we have to go to that youth, adult, and school athletics discussion too. But the program for the space would be an indoor track, which would be large enough to be used for intercollegiate tournaments, which we currently do not have a home field to do that for the winter season of track and field. And then because of the site constraints, the interior of the track would not be big enough for soccer or football, but it would be available for recreational activities, whatever they, you know, it would be a turf surface that could be used for many different things. It's just not sized to be an official soccer or football field because the site's not big enough. And then adjacent to that would be the support spaces, which would be locker rooms, offices, and weight rooms and other support facilities for our athletic and student rec programs. So it's a fairly modest program right now within, you know, that's focused on what Winona State thinks they can actually accomplish with a community partnership and other resources added to it. It could become much more. We're constrained by the financial resources that we can actually obtain to do something. So we're probably thinking more modest than what the project would really deserve.
And I think that's
And
probably
there's
a good,
enough rooftop on it to get 2 acres of solar PV, which would do a huge benefit for our campus to become carbon neutral.
those are some really, really great additional thoughts. I think that maybe, Jim, you touched on something that I do want to address as we're entering our last 15 minutes here. The youth, adult, and school athletic fields was also something that was ranked fairly highly here amongst all of you. And I do think that maybe this project, this WSU field house, is a good jumping off point from the Transformative Projects Committee to begin also considering those at the same time. I know that pushes us already to those first 5, but I do want to hear your responses and how you view the interplay related to youth, adult, and school athletic facilities and fields, and maybe how we can look at a holistic approach to Winona State's project and then future impacts on field utilization. Or maybe that comment was enough to say everything that ever needed to be said.
I guess I'm not totally certain on that, but I do think that's important. I think it's something to absolutely consider. I wouldn't want that to push out the kind of makerspace that we've also talked about. But I do think that could absolutely be wrapped up into what we do.
Which I suppose might be even better to maybe jump up directly to that makerspace, unless Jerome has another comment he'd like to add.
I was just going to add that it would, to me, make sense to put the athletic fields or the athletic youth, adult, school athletics and the field house project, as it's been described by Jim currently, as one item, and athletics and recreation facilities.
Go right ahead, Chris Stout.
I just wanted to add that in terms of needs for athletic facilities and fields and stuff, Southeast is currently constrained. We don't have, basketball courts, indoor athletic facilities, but we do have land that, it can be used for soccer, and we have rugby out there. And so we don't really have the infrastructure right now to need those things on a big basis to develop them. But if we could be a part of, a community transformative project that brings those things to bear, that would be very beneficial for us. And then just to add on the makerspace is, our college does have experience with this, creating a makerspace in Red Wing. And so as, if this becomes an idea going forward, I think we can bring in the people to help create that Red Wing makerspace and see what worked and maybe even what didn't work, and how that could be a positive thing for Winona as well.
Does anybody want to add on to that makerspace idea?
My comment on this again is similar to about the field house. This could be, as the slashes in the title suggest, this could be at least 3 different things. And so there's a big difference between a business incubator or a makerspace or a marketplace of sorts. Our town not too long ago did have a kind of co-office space called the Garage. It closed. They literally threw everything out of the building into a dumpster, and now it's a gymnastics school. And so I think we'd want to do something different than just a space where people could have an office that was away from home. And so, but I don't think that's what people had in mind. And so, but I think, going to Chris Stout's comment last time and what he just said now, a makerspace where we kind of have tools, maybe a 3D printer, those sorts of things would certainly be interesting. a business incubator, a restaurant incubator, a kind of, I think it was Jessica maybe last time, something kind of like the global market on Lake Street would be something different too. All of those sound interesting. And so again, not an objection, just a question of clarification. What are we talking about? Are we talking about one thing, two things, three things? So yeah.
Is there an example out there that has all of that together? Or do they typically exist separate? Or is that the transformative nature of putting them all together?
I do think that would be something that we would have to do a little bit more research on. If I'm honest, I don't have a lot of experience in the background in setting anything like that up. And I do think, to Scott's point, this is a really good opportunity for this committee to flesh out what that actually could feasibly look like. Is it going to be one of those three things? Is it going to be a combination? At least some of those elements. Ethan?
Yeah, I actually think that that's one of the reasons amongst many why I like this project idea. I don't think it's necessarily, the most important in the community, compared to some of the other big, overarching issues that we've talked about. But personally, I like it the most. I think it's the most exciting and honestly kind of fun. And it's quite concrete. I think it's a good thing for us to kind of sink our teeth into at first and work on fleshing out those differences and how, a project can develop. So I'm excited about this one. And to me, this seems like a great place to start for our committee.
The makerspace is really exciting. I think I'd love to see the one in Red Wing because it would lend itself to, how do you create that intergenerational space? Because, the middle school that I was a principal in, we created a makerspace because the media center wasn't being used as a library anymore. And we created a space where students really could spend their time in a makerspace atmosphere, and it was extremely popular among students. So I could see it being a really beneficial kind of, transformative project, just because it's a space where lots of people can come and your interests are there and you can expand it, how it'll grow itself. And I think it's got the potential to be a really well-received and also anyone can do it. And I think that there's something about, having a space where people can feel like everyone's welcome and they can be a part of it. But I'd really like to see Red Wings. I think that would be exciting.
I don't recall if this is an official city statement or not, but is there a three-legged stool that the city has spoken about before, where it's arts, entrepreneurship, and there's a third, outdoor rec? Is that what is that for the city? And could this kind of show that in a really tangible way?
I'm happy to be overruled by the city manager, but I don't think that has been an adopted tagline, direction, strategic policy, or directive.
You asked that though, because being new to Winona, my big impression is that the three marketable things that are cool here are arts, outdoors, and manufacturing. And haven't seen it marketed the way I would like to. So to hear you even asking about that is great. And I love the idea of trying to incorporate some of those ideas into a space like that. So I'm even more excited now.
Luke. Jim, is the makerspace still on the table at Laird Norton?
It's a possible program piece of Laird Norton, but just the physical real estate available there and the historic nature of the building, it would have to be fairly modest. It wouldn't be able to be a transformative project like this. It could be part of the program. It could be coordinated with whatever this would be, so that we don't have duplicate spaces in town. But it's still in the thinking stage when we get funding for the project.
All right, I do appreciate all of those comments. So based on the conversation today, I'm recognizing that we have about 5 minutes here and apparently somebody else wants to get onto our Zoom. I do want to note that it sounds like we're kind of coalescing at least around 3 ideas that we can begin to work on at the next meeting: the Riverfront Connector Trail System, the Incubator Makerspace, and the WSU Field House / Athletic Fields concept. If we have the blessing of this committee, we would like to bring back one of those for more in-depth discussion at the next meeting, and then bring back additional detail related to a community center and or police and or fire, as well as looking at that affordable, accessible housing component, maybe as a later conversation piece, just as the other subcommittees continue to marinate and get closer to their own ideas. If that sounds acceptable, I'm seeing some heads nodding. Perfect. Now also, I'd like to discuss our next meeting date. So I was hopeful that maybe we could do 2 weeks out from this meeting, which is June 8th, if 11:30 or if 1:30 still works for the majority of this committee. I'm seeing some head nods, some thumbs up. Jim, it looks like you have something to add, or maybe you're looking at your calendar.
Looking at my calendar, I can move things.
Okay. Same time, 1:30. All right, we will go ahead and pencil in the 8th at 1:30 for the next meeting. And then I also want to draw your attention to the 21st of June. On the 21st of June, we will be playing host to the founder of Strong Towns, Chuck Marone. Chuck Marone will be coming in and giving a public lecture at 6:30 p.m. that we will be inviting the entire public to, as well as all of our subcommittee members and our city council and planning commission members too. That will be located at the Friendship Center. He may also be giving a secondary conversation piece with more in-depth Q&A at 11:30 in the morning that day. That's tentatively scheduled currently, and I will get all that information to you as quickly as things are solidified and finalized. The 21st of June, that's Tuesday, the 21st. And I would give you something with a handout, but we're making these decisions as they come in yesterday. So hopefully we'll have something final this weekend. Chuck Marone is a city planner and a civil engineer, and he founded Strong Towns, which is a nationwide movement and conversation focused on resiliency and sustainability of cities. His first book was focused on a ground up revolution for cities and the way that we think about and operate things. So really it is transformative thinking about how communities are going about growth, how communities are going about services, and how they're going about adaptation. So he is very commonly speaking to legislators, governors, and other individuals. He's an expert in the field. And it is really the upswing of what city planning is for communities.
Good. Google him, Chuck Marone, M-A-H-R-O-N. You'll see some stuff on YouTube and whatnot. So.
All right. If there are no other comments, I'm going to let you all go so we can all get out in a timely manner. I really appreciate the robust conversation, and we will bring back that first conversation piece for more in-depth discussion on the 8th. Thank you all for your time.